Today we're getting into something I think a lot of us wonder about.
Hmm.
Why did we spend all those years in school but come out knowing, well, almost nothing practical about managing money?
Right. It's a huge gap. We're
Yeah.
digging into that using insights from a fictional podcast episode. It's called What Schools Should Have Taught Us About Money.
Yeah, from Mind the Gap, life lessons we missed. And our mission today is pretty clear. Figure out why basic finance isn't standard school stuff, and maybe more importantly, what we all missed.
It's so relatable, though, isn't it? You graduate, you can maybe, like, calculate the volume of a cone,
Exactly.
but figuring out your first 401k or, heck, even just filing taxes feels like this giant mystery.
Totally. I remember feeling pretty clueless, despite, acing calculus or whatever.
Yeah, I think most of us felt that way. I mean, think
Yeah.
about the sheer amount of stuff crammed into our heads in school. History dates, scientific formulas.
All useful, I guess, in some context.
Sure, but then you face your first real budget or try to understand credit, and it's like crickets, blank slate.
Definitely. I could probably still label a diagram of the digestive system,
Right.
but understanding how compound interest could actually make me money or hurt me with debt, that felt, yeah, completely foreign.
So the big question we're trying to unpack is why? Why this disconnect between academia and, like, basic financial survival skills?
Okay, so let's maybe start with what little we did encounter, if anything. What do you remember from school about money? The Source podcast touched on this too.
Barely anything, honestly,
Oh.
I think. Maybe the term opportunity cost came up once in some economics elective.
Oh, yeah. Vaguely remember that. And maybe, like, writing a fake check in some life skills class that nobody took seriously.
Yeah, the fake check exercise. That seems to be a universal and pretty useless memory. That was basically it for me.
Same here. The podcast hosts mentioned similar things. It's kind of funny and sad that so many of us had to, like, Google how to open a bank account after graduation.
Oh, absolutely. One of the hosts on Mind the Gap literally said they did that exact search. It highlights the absurdity,
Oh,
doesn't it?
really does.
Yeah.
Especially when you contrast it with the hours and hours spent on, say, the Pythagorean theorem. Useful, maybe, for some.
But probably not as universally useful as knowing how your credit score works.
Exactly. Or grasping compound interest early on. Now, the Mind the Gap folks raised a point that's, well, it's a bit provocative.
Yeah, they did. This idea that maybe it's not just an accident, this lack of financial education.
What do you mean, not an accident?
Well, the suggestion they explored was whether a population that's, shall we say, less financially literate might actually be beneficial
Yeah.
to certain parts of the economy.
Huh. Okay. Like how?
The thinking goes if people don't really understand debt, interest rates, budgeting,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're more likely to rack up credit card debt.
Okay. Or make spending decisions based more on emotion, maybe.
Exactly. And rely more heavily on credit in general. It's a bit of a cynical take, maybe, but
But it makes you think. It definitely makes you pause and reconsider why something so fundamental is missing.
it really does. So, okay, let's flip it. If we were designing the ideal curriculum, what absolutely needs to be in there? What should schools have taught us? Mind the Gap had some solid ideas.
Top of my list, and theirs, I think, has to be budgeting. Just basic budgeting.
Absolutely. Step one.
Yeah. Tracking what comes in, what goes out, setting goals, living within your means. It sounds simple, but it's the foundation for everything else.
Couldn't agree more. And tied right into that is compound interest.
Oh, huge.
Yeah. Showing kids, like visually, how starting to save even a little bit early on can just explode over time thanks to compounding. That's powerful.
Game changing, potentially. Imagine knowing that at 16 instead of 36.
Right. Then there's credit, understanding credit scores.
Definitely. What they are, why they matter so much for loans, renting, sometimes even jobs.
And crucially, how to build good credit responsibly without just getting buried in debt.
That's key. Okay, what else? Paychecks seem obvious, but
But they can be confusing. All those deductions, taxes, insurance, whatever else. Understanding your net pay, your take-home pay, is essential when you start working.
good point. And student loans, that's a big one for so many.
Massive. Schools should really cover how interest works on those, the difference between federal and private loans, what repayment options look like,
Yeah, just the basics could save so much stress and money down the line.
for sure. And finally, the one everyone dreads, taxes.
Yeah.
Maybe not how to become a CPA, but just
Yeah.
the basics of filing a return. What are deductions? What resources are out there? The podcast mentioned things like TurboTax, just pointing people in the right direction.
Makes sense. Just demystifying it a bit. So We've talked about what's missing. What about the real world impact? The consequences of not knowing this stuff? The Mind the Gap episode got pretty real here.
Yeah, it did. And the most obvious consequence you see everywhere is just debt.
Mm-hmm. Credit cards.
Right. High interest credit card debt, payday loans trapping people, even just overdraft fees piling up. It happens so easily if you haven't been taught the fundamentals.
The podcast shared examples, right? Like kids maxing out credit cards in college for, pizza and clothes, having zero clue about the interest.
Exactly. And it's hard to blame them entirely. The podcast used this great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like getting mad at someone for not speaking French when they were never, ever taught French.
Huh. That's good. Expecting financial wizardry with zero training is, yeah, unfair.
Totally unrealistic.
Okay.
And it's not just about avoiding debt pitfalls.
Mm.
It's also about missed opportunities, right?
Big time. Like not starting to invest early, putting off retirement savings because it feels too far away or too complicated.
Or just not having that emergency fund cushion, so a surprise car repair becomes a major crisis instead of an inconvenience.
Right. These aren't small things. They add up.
And it feeds into this feeling for a lot of people maybe that building wealth is impossible or only for certain people.
Yeah, when actually, as the podcast pointed out, making smart, even small financial moves consistently over time can build wealth for lots of people.
Exactly. The knowledge gap creates that feeling of impossibility sometimes.
Okay, so the system might have let us down a bit here. What can people listening right now do? How do we fill this gap ourselves? Mind the Gap had some actionable stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first step, maybe the most important, is just deciding to take ownership of your own financial education. Don't wait for someone else.
Right. So where do you start? Books?
Books are great. The podcast recommended a few good starter ones, written in plain English, not intimidating jargon.
Mm.
Things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Psychology of Money.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I Will Teach You to Be Rich. They're designed to be accessible entry points.
Good suggestions. And podcasts, obviously. Besides this one, of course.
Right. There are tons of great finance podcasts. Planet Money is always fascinating for the bigger picture.
Hmm.
The Ramsey Show has a very specific approach.
Yeah, very specific, but helpful for many on debt.
True. And things like Bigger Pockets, if you're curious about, say, real estate investing. Lots of options depending on your interest.
And online, YouTube, blogs.
Oh, definitely. YouTube is a gold mine. You can find videos explaining literally anything: how taxes work, intro to investing, budgeting spreadsheets, saving hacks, usually in short, digestible chunks.
Okay, so resources are out there. But it's not just learning, it's doing, right?
Exactly. Theory is one thing, practice is another. The podcast really pushed starting small and concrete.
Like what?
Like just track your spending for 1 month, use an app, a spreadsheet, whatever. Just see where the money is actually going. That alone can be eye-opening.
That's a good, manageable first step.
Totally. Or look into opening a Roth IRA. Even if you can only put in a tiny amount to start, just opening the account is a big hurdle to overcome.
Breaks the inertia.
Right. And build a small emergency fund. Even $500 or $1,000 makes a difference. It gives you breathing room.
Those all sound achievable. What else do they suggest?
A really important one. Talk about it. Share what you learn.
Break the taboo.
Yes. Talk to your kids, your family, your friends. If we start normalizing conversations about money and sharing knowledge, we help break that cycle of financial illiteracy for the next generation too.
That's a powerful point. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on what schools maybe should have taught us, what's the main takeaway?
I think the core message, coming strongly from the Mind the Gap source, is that money isn't this mystical, scary thing. It's fundamentally a tool.
A tool you can learn to use.
Exactly. Once you understand how it works, budgeting, saving, investing, debt, you can use it to build security, build wealth, whatever your goals are. It doesn't matter so much what you earn right now. Understanding it gives you control.
Control and freedom makes sense.
And if the formal education system didn't give us that foundation,
Then it's kind of on us now.
it is. It's on us to be proactive, learn this stuff for ourselves, and maybe, just maybe, help the next generation start off a little better equipped.
Well said. So that leaves a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah, maybe ask yourself, what specific money topic do you really wish you'd learned about way earlier?
And maybe more importantly, what's one small, tangible thing you're going to do, maybe even this week, to start closing that knowledge gap for yourself?